No son of Troy will ever submit to a foreign ruler.
For 2,000 years, readers treated it as just a legend, a literary landscape, but not a real place. This was a war so famous that it shaped literature, philosophy, and military strategy of every civilization that came after it. A story where gods walked amongst men, and the greatest warrior in history wept on the battlefield. This is Troy, where for a millennia the line between fiction and history was blurred. But then, modern archaeologists dug beneath a hill in Turkey and found something that changed everything. Real evidence of destruction, roughly aligning with later Greek chronology. So, what actually happened? Was there a real Trojan War? Did Achilles and Hector truly fight outside of those very walls? Well, today we're diving into the story of Troy, where myth and reality collide, and we will try to separate what we know from what we can only pass as a hypothesis. So, sit back, relax, and welcome to History Camp. What's up, people, and welcome back to History Camp. My name is Mark Gagnon, and thank you for joining me in my tent, where every single week we explore the most interesting, fascinating, and controversial stories from all time, from all history, forever. Yes, this is the purpose of the show. I sit in this tent every single week, and I try to understand everything that's ever happened. And oh boy, there's a lot of stuff. There's a whole world out there with things happening every single day, and we're wasting time in here doing the intro. But I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Every time you click on a video, every time you support us, it means the world. It keeps the lights on, keeps the fire burning here at the campsite. And I have great news. We have a campfire. Now, what is the campfire? That is the place where you want to gather. That's the place where you want to get around and tell stories. And that is over at Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/campgagnon. That is the gathering. That is the campfire. That is where people just like yourselves go to feel more like you. I mean, we drop extra episodes. We got content that only lives behind the paywall. We got Zooms every month where we actually just hang out and just talk shit. It's the best. I really love it. Merch discounts, all that stuff. Check it out. Patreon.com/campgagnon. All the proceeds go to a haircut for my dear friend Christos. How are you, Christos?
As long as I'm getting proceeds, sign up.
All right, okay, all right. Not all right. See, now we're cutting. Now we're chopping that down. Your long, illustrious hair needs to get chopped off. All right, and I think the audience has had it with how handsome and just beautiful your hair is.
Sounds like the pot calling the kettle black, but
yes, that is exactly what's happening. You are black. Is that what that means?
That's not what I said.
I don't know exactly what you said, but look, we're talking about the myth of Troy. Have you heard of this before?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a Greek.
Exactly.
So this is, I've heard it said that the legends of, the Iliad, the Odyssey, it's, like these famous battles of Troy, like this is etched into the subconscious of the Greeks going back thousands of years. I mean, Alexander the Great allegedly slept with this very story under his pillow. What say you that?
I'd say I met a few Helen of Troys in my day. But
Oh, okay, Christos. That is just a regular 6. For you, I mean, come on, dude, that's what I mean. This is a fascinating story, truly. I mean, Alexander the Great, that's kind of my purview into this. I never actually read Iliad, the Odyssey, any of that. I mean, no, I read the Odyssey. I never read the Iliad. But I understand that, Alexander the Great wanted to be Achilles. That was his thing. He was like, I am destined to be Achilles. I'm literally the guy in the book. Like, that is a wild amount of influence. And for the longest time, people were like, oh, yeah, this is just a story. But according to some current records, the line between what is real and what is fake has been blurred. And today we're figuring that all out. So first, let's understand the Trojan War. We have to understand the mythos around it. And really, we got to understand the ancient Greeks, which no one has ever done in history, but we're going to give it our best shot, all right? And we're not talking about like armies or politics. We're talking about a party and a golden apple. We're going into the mythos, the founding sort of stories that the Greeks tell themselves. Now, according to the myth, there was this big wedding for the sea goddess Thetis, and there was a mortal king named Peleus. And basically every god and goddess on Mount Olympus was invited to pull up. Every god was accepted except for one, and that's Eris. Eris is the goddess of discord. Yes, she's a gaming mod, and she lives in a basement. No, not that discord. She is the goddess of basically chaos, of sowing dissent, and was left off the guest list for obvious reasons, right? If I'm having a wedding, I'm not inviting Eris. I have a few Erises in my life, and I didn't invite them. But you don't want that kind of thing showing up at the party. But what does Eris do? Classic goddess of discord, shows up uninvited and tossed a golden apple into the crowd. And in it or on it rather, was inscribed a single phrase, "For the fairest." Literally, like, yo, the baddest bee in here, you guys get the apple. So then 3 goddesses immediately claimed it, right? Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Zeus wisely refused to judge the contest himself, like, because obviously that's a pretty, like, because Zeus is married to, come on, bro, you don't know this, Christos?
I should, but I don't.
You should. I think Hera. I think Zeus and Hera, but I don't know. I'm just kind of like swinging here. It is Hera.
It was Hera.
So Zeus and Hera are married, and all of a sudden, he's at this wedding. His wife pulls up and goes, "Can you judge who's the hottest? Me or these other 2 women?" And he's like, "Oh, God, I'm not, can't get involved in that." So he doesn't. And instead, he sent the 3 goddesses to a young Trojan prince named Paris, or Paris.
Body.
Oh, you say body?
Yeah.
That's kind of nice.
It's Greek.
Body. I'm going to say Paris. And basically, Paris is the son of King Priam, and as you know, Priam of Troy. So each goddess offers Paris a bribe. Hera offered him power, dominion over all of Europe and Asia, which is kind of funny that the goddess of all the goddesses was like, "I'll give you some of the land." Like, I'm assuming in the story it was like all that they knew, but it's funny that they were like, she was like, "Yeah, you're not going to get Argentina. That's crazy. You're not going to get Morocco."
Why would they?
I'm just saying, if you're offering this whole bribe to get this golden apple to be the fairest of them all, you would think you would up the ante. Regardless, all right? Athena offers him wisdom and skill in battle. He would never lose a war. That's a pretty good sales pitch. That actually, I think, is better than land. Well, actually, you do war to get land. Anyway, Aphrodite offers the most beautiful woman in the world. Yeah. It's kind of funny that even way back then, they were like, yeah, obviously. Because men go to war to what? Get land. And why do they want land? To get women. So just go straight to women. Now, Paris chooses Aphrodite, the most beautiful woman in the world. And that decision, according to the Greeks, is what burned Troy to the ground. The most beautiful woman in the world that is basically offered is Helen. And Helen is married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Don't you hate that? I mean, this is like a real like monkey paw thing, because it's like, hey, I assumed when you said the most beautiful woman in the world, it would be a single woman, right? Like that, like, oh, give me the most beautiful woman in the world, and then it's like an 85-year-old, and you're like, what? And they were like, oh, she used to be the most. You didn't specify when. She is the most beautiful of all time.
You're saying married women are 85-year-old women?
I'm just saying, it's like if you're thinking most beautiful, you just think like, oh yeah, that conditionally would mean, you know, between the ages of like 24 and 35, you know? Is that bad? All right, let me rephrase that. If you're thinking the most beautiful woman in the world, you're assuming, oh, she's not like a criminal. Like you don't want someone that's going to like murder you. You assume that she's like not psychotic. You assume that she's single.
No STIs?
No, I think beautiful women can have STIs, actually. I think perhaps the most beautiful woman.
Probably, right?
Anyway, now, this guy's the king of Sparta, and Paris sails to Sparta, and whether he seduced her or abducted her depends on like which version you read, but either way, Helen is now chilling with Paris and is going back to Troy. And now Menelaus wants her back, because obviously it's his wife, A, and B, she's the hottest woman in the world. But he had a secret weapon that Paris knew nothing about. So, before Helen had married Menelaus, she had dozens of suitors. Every king and prince and, I mean, just everyone in Greece. They wanted a piece. And her father, fearing that the rejected suitors would start a war amongst themselves, I mean, that's how bad this girl was. He basically made them all swear an oath. Whoever won Helen's hand, the rest would defend that marriage. Think about that. It was a mutual defense pact, and now Menelaus was calling it in. So the man who organized the Greek response was Menelaus' brother, this guy Agamemnon. This is the king of Mycenae and was the most powerful ruler in all of Greece at the time. And Agamemnon didn't just want Helen back. He wanted all of Troy. Yeah, according to later Greek tradition, he assembled the largest fleet of the ancient world, the largest fleet ever assembled, over 1,000 ships, according to Homer, carrying the greatest warriors of the Greek world. Now, let's just pause the story here, all right? We're going to do like a little Lion King 1.5 thing. We're going to talk about what and who is talking about this and how that changes what the story actually is. So, you might have heard of Homer, right? He's the Greek poet that writes the Iliad. And the Iliad is an epic poem about the Trojan War. It was likely the product of, centuries of oral song and storytelling. Some of it is fact, some of it is kind of embellished, some of it's just purely fictional. And it was crystallized sometime around like the 8th or early 7th century BC. Now, by Homer's time, the world that the poet was describing was already gone. And the Iliad doesn't actually cover the entire Trojan War. It just covers a few weeks in the 10th year of the siege. And it centers on one dude, this guy Achilles. Now, every time I think of Achilles, the only thing I think of, I'm actually curious. What do you think, Christos?
Heel.
Heel, obviously. Come on now. But there's two. One, Hercules has a great little joke on Achilles.
What is it?
It's like there's a statue of Achilles, and then I think Hercules is like looking at it, and he like just taps it very gently, and the whole thing collapses, but he taps it right on the heel. Spoiler alert, sorry. I'm not sorry. It's a 2,000-year-old story. If you don't know by now, that's on you. The other thing I always think about is that one, what is it, Wheel of Fortune, where they try to guess the letters?
Yeah.
This guy's up there, and it's like the warrior Achilles, but there's like 3 letters missing. And he's like, I think I'm going to guess it. And everyone's like, oh yeah, he's got it. It's so obviously the hero Achilles. And then he goes up there and goes, the hero Achilles. And the dude's like, I am so sorry. It's not Achilles. And then
Trebek just looks down.
Literally, he's just like, oh. And it's like, so like, you knew it and you're actually getting punished for reading it and not knowing how to pronounce it. That's kind of the bad thing. Like I have friends that say homage. And it's like, you actually know what the word is. You just don't know how to pronounce homage.
I think more people are saying homage now than homage.
Yeah, maybe. And then eventually that's just going to become the word. Regardless, it's just the funniest video ever. The hero Achilles. And just going, oh. And then it goes to the person right next to him. The hero Achilles? And everyone's like, yeah. And then it just cuts back to his face. And he's just like, oh. All-time clip. Regardless, that guy, Achilles from Wheel of Fortune, he's basically the greatest warrior that Greece has ever produced. His mother was the goddess Thetis. Remember her from the whole thing? According to the later legend, she had dipped him in the river Styx as an infant, making him invulnerable. He was completely protected and virtually immortal everywhere, except for the very heel where she held him. Would you think that she would just do the whole job, right?
Get her fingers in that thing. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, my fingertips are now invincible. It's like, all right, both of you guys jump in head first. I don't even understand. Regardless, the famous story comes from later tradition, not from the Iliad itself. Homer actually never mentions the river Styx or the heel or any of that stuff. Achilles was fast and ferocious and was terrifying in general. He was just a beast, all right? He knew, because the prophecy had told him, that he had 2 possible fates, that he was either going to live a long, quiet life and just be forgotten, or he could fight at Troy and die young but be remembered as a hero forever. And as you can imagine, for the reasons that we're obviously talking about him, he chooses glory. But alongside Achilles is this iconic cast of characters, all right? And they have made the Iliad kind of what it is, this lasting, influential piece of literature. And they also shaped so much of storytelling and character development and like side characters, like stuff that we still use to this very day. So on the Trojan side was this guy, Hector. This is the eldest son of King Priam and the commander of Troy's armies. And this is where Achilles fought for personal glory. Hector was fighting for something different. He was fighting for his city and for his family, and most importantly, for his infant son. In the Iliad, Homer actually gives us one of the most heartbreaking, like the saddest visuals ever, maybe in all of literature. Hector is reaching for his baby boy, and the child is crying because he doesn't recognize his father in his war helmet. And Hector laughs and takes off his helmet and holds his son, and he knows that he's probably going to die and never see this boy grow up, but he fights anyway. Beautiful. Could bring a tear to my eye. But it's not. And then there is Odysseus, the king of Ithaca. This is like the smartest, sharpest dude in all of the Greek army. He didn't really want to go to Troy at all. And so when the recruiters arrived, Odysseus pretended to be crazy. He was like plowing his fields with salt, which would obviously destroy your fields. But the story goes that they placed his infant son in front of the plow. And then when Odysseus swerved to avoid the child, they knew that he was actually faking it. Which, I don't know. Like, I could imagine someone being crazy is like, yeah, I think that, you know, I am Jesus Christ, but also I'm not going to kill my kid. Anyway, so then they go to war, and his cunning eventually, you know, would end it. And then there was Ajax, this massive, immovable beast of a man carrying a shield said to be made of 7 layers of ox hide and a layer of bronze. He was the Greek wall. He was the man who basically held the line when everyone else broke. And then, of course, Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion and the person that he loved the most in the world. And remember that name because we'll come back to him in a second. Now, on the Trojan side, alongside Hector, obviously you have Paris, more of a lover kind of thief type dude than a fighter, and kind of starts this whole, saga. And then you have the aging king Priam, who had built Troy into one of the wealthiest cities in the ancient world and would then live to watch it burn down. Now, let's move on to the siege. According to the wider mythic tradition, especially later epics, the Greeks besieged Troy for 10 years. A decade of fighting and raiding the surrounding countryside and skirmishes, and just Troy's fortifications were legendary. It had these massive stone walls that the myths claimed were built by the gods Poseidon and by Apollo themselves. The Greeks couldn't break through. They just couldn't. And the Trojans couldn't drive them away. So as a result, they were kind of just stalemated for 10 years. The Iliad picks up the story in that 10th year, right at the very end, and it begins with this catastrophic argument. So you got Agamemnon, the Greek commander. He's basically taken a war prize. He captured a woman named Chryseis, and Chryseis' father is a priest of Apollo. So when Agamemnon refuses to return her, Apollo sends a plague through the Greek camps. Achilles publicly affronts Agamemnon and is like, bro, what are you doing? Give the girl back. Everyone's dying. Agamemnon agrees. But then he takes Achilles' war prize, a woman named Briseis, as compensation. Achilles is obviously humiliated, and his response changes the course of the entire war. He refuses to fight. He withdraws to his tent, and he stays there while the Trojans basically push the Greeks back to their ships. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you know what time it is. It's time to level up, and Blue Chew just dropped something wild, okay? Blue Chew's been rocking with us from the beginning, so of course we have to rock, pun intended, with them, all right? And what they've just done is changing the game, all right? This is next level gold medal energy. This is Blue Chew Gold. If you've never heard of it, this is the newest innovation from the #1 chewable ED brand, all right? This isn't the little blue pill that your grandpa used. This is the 4-in-1 beast that is setting the gold standard for performance. We're talking 2 ingredients to keep the good times rolling, okay? Mixed with apomorphine and oxytocin that are going to turn up the arousal and the connections in your brain, as well as the ingredients to keep the blood flow, to keep everything pumping, okay? Blue Chew Gold dissolves into your tongue and works in as little as 15 minutes, and that means you're going to be rocking quicker and staying in the game longer. Let me just say, that's how we put this tent up every single episode. We give Christos a Blue Chew, and you know what? We have this tent rocking all year round, okay? That's what it takes. Now, I recommend this in a married Christian relationship, but you know what? You guys can do whatever you want. Blue Chew is the ultimate service to get you these chewables to your door in a discreet way to keep the bedroom on fire. And we have a special deal for the listeners of this program. You're going to get 10% off your first month of Blue Chew Gold if you use the code GAGNON, Gagnon. That's promo code GAGNON, Gagnon. You can visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And thank you so much to Blue Chew for keeping the lights on and making this show possible. Now let's get back to it. Without Achilles, the Greeks are suddenly losing. Hector leads the Trojans on a devastating offensive, nearly burning the Greek fleet completely to the ground. And this is where Patroclus makes this fateful decision. Remember, that's the guy that Achilles loves. He goes to Achilles and begs him to return to battle. And Achilles basically refuses and says, I'm not going. That dude took my girl. I'm out. Now, Patroclus asks for the next best thing, permission to wear Achilles' armor and basically lead his men to go fight. And Achilles agrees, but he warns him, hey, you can go, put on my armor. They'll think it's me. Push the Trojans back from the ships, but don't do anything else, and then we'll figure it out. Now, Patroclus does a lot more. He gets a little sugar high from this little skirmish. So, wearing Achilles' armor, he rallies the Greeks and drives the Trojans all the way back to the walls of Troy. Now, the Trojans think that Achilles has returned and they panic. But Patroclus pushes too far. He doesn't listen to Achilles. He reaches the walls of the city itself, and there, Hector kills him. Now, right off the bat, let's just be clear about what happens next, because it is one of the most devastating sequences in all of ancient literature ever. When Achilles learns that Patroclus is dead, he lets out a scream so terrible that, according to the story, his mother hears it at the bottom of the ocean. He doesn't just grieve, he's destroyed. And his grief turns into a rage that is just all-consuming. And it becomes so much that it becomes the driving force of the entire poem. Achilles returns to battle wearing new armor forged by the god Hephaestus himself and cuts through the Trojan armor like wildfire. I mean, the dude's just just passing the ball, bro. He's hot. And so he fills the river Scamander with so many bodies that the river gods rise up in anger. And they're like, what are you doing dumping all these bodies in a river? Finally, outside the walls of Troy, he meets Hector. Homer writes that Hector runs. The greatest Trojan warrior ever sees Achilles and just books it 3 times around the walls of the city because he knows what's coming next. Finally, tricked by the goddess Athena into standing his ground, Hector turns and fights, and Achilles kills him. But Achilles isn't done. He ties Hector's body to the back of his chariot and drags it around the walls of Troy, around the tomb of Patroclus, day after day. And it's in this act of desecration that shocks everyone, even the gods. But again, Achilles was going crazy. He's blind with rage. Now, the Iliad doesn't end with the fall of Troy, but with something quieter, I guess, and in a lot of ways like more poetic, a lot more powerful from a rhetorical perspective. Old King Priam, Hector's father, crosses the battlefield alone at night and enters the Greek camp, and he kneels before Achilles, the man who literally killed his son, and he just asks for Hector's body. He's begging him, like, please. He says, think of your own father. And Achilles, for the first time, sees his enemy as a human being, and he weeps. And the two of them just hold each other and they weep together. And Achilles gives Hector's body back to his dad. Now, that is where Homer ends the poem. Not with victory, not with the fall of Troy, just two enemies, I guess, like, the father of an enemy and, Achilles himself sharing this moment of grief. And they're both really crying. And I think in a way, Achilles is crying for the loss of his friend, and obviously Hector's dad is crying for the loss of his son. And that, more than any battle scene, more than any of the themes of honor or glory, that is why the Iliad has endured for literally almost 3,000 years. So Homer doesn't describe the fall of Troy in the Iliad, and this is told about in later epics and tragedies. And for that story, we have to rely on the so-called epic cycle, a collection of poems by other ancient authors, most of which survive only in fragments or pieces or summaries and later works where they reference them. And this is especially prominent in Virgil's Aeneid, written nearly 700 years after Homer. Now, according to these traditions, Achilles didn't survive the war. He's killed by Paris, of all people, the weakest warrior on the field, the guy who literally gets this whole thing kicked off because he goes and steals/seduces a woman from the Spartans, and he literally shoots him with an arrow guided by Apollo. The arrow strikes his heel, at least according to the later tradition. None of the earliest sources agree on the exact manner of his death. The heel shot is a detail that kind of grew in the retelling, which is not derived from the Iliad. But of course, the image stuck. The greatest warrior of the age, the most fearsome man to ever live, brought down by the one man that no one really respected, hitting the one spot where he was vulnerable. The Greeks said even the gods had a sense of irony. After Achilles' death, Odysseus devises a plan that will end the war. The Greeks get together and build this enormous wooden horse. You probably heard of this or at least seen it. And this horse is hollow on the inside, and they hide their best warriors inside the horse. The rest of the Greek army sails away, appearing to abandon the siege. The war is done, and there's a horse. Now, the Trojans, believing that the war is over, drag the horse inside, basically as like a trophy. But there are warnings. The Trojan priest Laocoon famously said, "I fear Greeks even bearing gifts." This is the origin of the popular phrase, "Beware of Greeks bringing gifts." Christos, you gave me this most immaculate honey not a year ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah, you have HPV now.
No, oh, oral? Through the honey?
Genital.
No, how do you know what I did with the honey, dude? That's crazy. Now, once again, the prophetess Cassandra, cursed by Apollo, and this is the curse, to see the future but never to be believed, screamed that the horse meant death, and of course, due to the prophecy, no one believed. Now, that is one of the most all-time evil curses ever. If I'm Cassandra, though, I would just say the opposite of what you want to happen, right? If Cassandra's like, bring that horse in here, I'm sure it's full of gold, everyone would be like, we don't believe that. Keep the horse out there. She's got to know that you can reverse psychology. Anyway, now that night, the Greek warriors crept out of the horse, they opened the gates, and signaled the fleet, which had only sailed to a nearby island they were hiding. The Greek army poured into Troy. And what followed was just a massacre. Priam was killed at his own altar. Hector's infant son was thrown from the walls. The women of Troy were enslaved, and the city itself was burned to ashes. Troy fell, and the story became immortalized. Now, for over 2,000 years, many scholars in the early modern period, they heard this story. They read the actual source material, and they went through, and they were like, yeah, this is just a story. This is a metaphor talking about, like honor and tragedy and, family and love. Like, this is just a play. It's not a real thing. Homer's world of gods and heroes, it's not history. This is just a literary invention and nothing more. However, some 19th century classicists did suspect that a real site was perhaps behind the legend. And then in the 1870s, a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann made a fantastic discovery. But Mr. Schliemann, well, he was a complicated guy, okay, to put it mildly. He was a self-made millionaire, a compulsive liar who would fabricate the very own parts of his own autobiography, and an amateur archaeologist with a lot more ambition than actual archaeology insight. He was convinced, against the scholarly consensus of the time, that Homer's Troy was a real place, and he believed that it was buried beneath a mound called Hisarlik in northwest Turkey, near the entrance to the Dardanelles. Now, he started digging in 1870, and what he found stunned the world. He found buried under Hisarlik, it's not just one city, it was a bunch of cities layered on top of each other, over and over like a cake. And over the centuries, city after city had been built in the same exact spot, each one rising from the ruins of the last. And obviously, civilizations did this all the time. You would either stumble across this, great place to live, and there'd be some huts that were kind of burned down, and you'd be like, oh, let's just build on top. It's great. It's already cleared out, there's a river nearby. Archaeologists would eventually identify at least 9 major layers spanning roughly 3,000 years to the Roman period. Now, Schliemann, in his excitement, dug straight through several layers and literally just went all the way down and said that he found Priam's Troy. He even claimed to have discovered Priam's treasure, a cache of gold jewelry and artifacts that he smuggled out of Turkey and presented to the world as proof that this was actually the ancient city of Troy. Now, what's crazy about this whole thing is that he later admitted that he just made up parts of the story. And the treasure that he actually discovered came from a layer 1,000 years too early. Isn't that wild? He discovers gold that's actually older than Troy. It's dating back to around 2500 BC, long before the Trojan War. But later, the discoveries of more careful archaeologists revealed that the layer known as Troy VIIA, or 7A, dating to somewhere between 1220 and 1180 BC, showed distinct evidence of some type of violent destruction. There's fire damage and arrowheads that are scattered, and even like unburied human remains, which is very strange for the time. And this combination of damage and weaponry and emergency storage jars crammed inside houses had been interpreted by some archaeologists as signs of a siege, though there are not any written records that identify the attackers or what the city even was. The 20th century archaeologists responsible for these new discoveries are these guys Wilhelm Dorpfeld and Carl Blagen. And then there was Manfred Korfmann, who led a massive institutional project in 1988, which also contributed to many of these discoveries. Now, scholars still debate whether it's Troy 6H, destroyed by an earthquake, or Troy 7A, destroyed by war, that lies behind Homer's Troy. And some argue that the legend blends kind of memories of both. The destruction window does roughly line up with when the ancient Greeks said that Troy fell, though those ancient dates, like Eratosthenes' calculation of 1184 or 1183 BC, are themselves later scholarly constructs. They're not contemporary records. They happen to align with the destruction horizon at Troy 7A. But that alignment is just suggestive. It's not actually proof. Now, does that prove that the Trojan War happened the way that Homer described it? Obviously not. There's no inscription saying Achilles was here and there was an arrow guided by Apollo that hit him in the heel and he died. No archaeological evidence of this giant wooden horse was ever discovered. Obviously, it'd be too old. The city that was destroyed at Troy 7A was significant, but it was smaller than the grand description of the city of Troy that Homer describes. Though Korfmann's excavations did reveal a much larger, lower city than previously known, suggesting that Troy was potentially more important than earlier archaeologists had even assumed. What the evidence found at the archaeological sites tells us is basically this, that there was a real fortified city at Hissarlik. It's kind of it. It was wealthy and strategically located, likely benefiting from this position near the Dardanelles and, trade routes between the Aegean and the Black Sea. And sometime between 1220 and 1180 BC, it was destroyed violently. Something happened. Now, whether it was similar to what Homer described and, like a love affair gone bad that turns into this all-out war, the most beautiful woman ever, or was it just, one of the many numerous millions of sieges that have happened throughout human history to an ancient site that just got built on, then eventually forgotten? Because there are multiple things at play during that time in history that might have contributed to the fall of Troy that Homer never wrote about. The Late Bronze Age was one of the most interconnected and sophisticated periods in all of ancient history. And the truth is, around the time of the Trojan War, it was about to collapse. You see, around 1400 to 1200 BC, the Western Mediterranean was dominated by a network of powerful civilizations. The Mycenaeans were essentially the Greeks of the Bronze Age. They controlled mainland Greece and the Aegean islands from a massive fortified palace at Mycenae. And then you have the Tyrans and the Pylos. These are the people that Homer was writing about for, 4 centuries after their civilization was basically, wiped off the earth. When he described Agamemnon as the king of Golden Mycenae, he was referring to a real place. And when Schliemann excavated Mycenae in 1876, he found shaft graves filled with gold, including the famous golden death masks. Now, Schliemann reportedly telegraphed the king of Greece and said this: "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." The thing is that he hadn't. The masks were just centuries too early, but the discovery proved that Mycenaean Greece had been massively wealthy. Now, to the east, in what is now Turkey, sat the Hittite Empire, one of the great powers of the Bronze Age, rivaling even Egypt in its time. And this is where some of the most compelling evidence for a historical Trojan War comes from. You see, Hittite diplomatic records written in cuneiform on clay tablets. Cuneiform is basically like this imprinting method that, the Hittite people and Sumerians, they would basically use to keep records in these clay tablets, basically mention a place called Wailusa. Many scholars believe that this is the Hittite name for the city of Troy, corresponding to the Greek Ilios or Ilion. These same records mention a kingdom called Ahiawa, which most specialists think referred to, broadly the Mycenaean world, though not everyone agrees. Hittite texts do not name specific Greek cities, and the identification, while widely accepted, is not settled amongst every scholar. One Hittite text, known as the Alexandru Treaty, records this agreement between the Hittite king and the ruler of Wailusa, this man named Alexandru. Now, Alexandru, interesting, sounds a lot like Alexander. Anyway, that's a little side fact. And Paris, the guy from Troy, his other name in the Greek tradition was Alexander. You see what's happening? You have the Alexandru Treaty, right? Alexandru, and then you have Paris, and his name is Alexander. Now, many scholars see this as a genuine linguistic connection, a possible historical kernel behind this Paris tradition, yet others caution that it might be just completely coincidental and it was just a common naming pattern in the region. But either way, we have Hittite records mentioning a place that sounds a lot like Troy, ruled by a man whose name is literally Paris's alternative name, in diplomatic contact with people who sound a lot like the Greeks of Homer's story. Now, again, none of this proves that the Iliad is literally history, but it strongly suggests that the Trojan War legend was rooted in real Bronze Age conflicts between the Mycenaean Greeks and the peoples of Western Anatolia. And then, around 1200 BC, the entire system collapsed. Within a span of roughly 50 years, nearly every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean was either destroyed or just severely diminished. The Hittite Empire fell. Mycenaean Greece was devastated, and the great palaces burned down, writing lost, trade networks destroyed. Egypt barely survived, and the cities across the Levant were just completely demolished. Now, scholars call this entire phenomenon, the collapsing of all these civilizations in the region, the Late Bronze Age collapse, and it remains one of the great mysteries of ancient history. What caused it? And no one really knows, but there's, of course, many explanations. It was likely caused by some combination of drought plus famine plus civil war, internal rebellion, revolution, systemic failure, and then raids by the mysterious Sea Peoples. Now, Troy's destruction around 1220 to 1180 BC fits pretty squarely within this catastrophe. It's very possible that the Trojan War was one event, or even a series of events within the broader collapse. And it could have been a real Mycenaean military campaign against a wealthy Anatolian city that was just transformed over centuries of oral tradition to be this great epic story that we know today. Now, the Trojan War, whether it happened exactly as it described or whether it ever happened at all, might be one of the most influential stories in the history of Western civilization. Like, for a war that we don't even know if it really happened, it's one of the most impactful wars ever. And the impact, is everywhere. The Iliad, by most accounts, is the oldest surviving work of Western literature. Every epic poem, war novel, every story about heroes, glory, the cost of glory, in some sense is in the shadow of the Iliad. When Virgil wrote the Aeneid in the 1st century, he created Rome's national epic by having the Trojan prince Aeneas escape the fall of Troy and then eventually found a city called Rome. The Romans, the most powerful state in the ancient world, literally built their identity on being descendants of a Trojan refugee. The influence here is crazy. Obviously, the Roman Empire extends all the way to Europe and England, and then from England, we have America. Like, in a way, our founding myth is kind of predicated on this story that we don't even know if it's real. Like, is that not crazy?
It's real.
Of course. Shout out the Greeks. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I just want to state the obvious. You're not going to hire a chiropractor to do brain surgery. And if you're going to go fight in the octagon, you wouldn't hire a guy that watches a lot of UFC. And if you have a personal injury case, you're not going to just hire your buddy that's good with contracts, because you know that when you're hurt, it's because someone else was negligent. You don't want just, lawyery vibes. You want real lawyers. And that's where Morgan & Morgan comes in. They are America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Crazy thing, they've recovered over $30 billion for over 500,000 clients. They've got a real track record of fighting to get people full and fair compensation. So if you are ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan, and their fee is free unless they win. Yes, free. You literally don't pay anything unless they win your case. That's how confident Morgan & Morgan is that they can get compensation for you and your injuries. So for more information, go to forthepeople.com/Gagnon. That is forthepeople.com/GAGNON, or dial #law. That is #529, and let them know that you got sent by the people here at the campsite. Also, this is a paid advertisement. Now let's get back to the show. And then later on, medieval European kingdoms would compete to basically claim Trojan ancestry. So the Franks said that they descended from Trojan refugees who, escaped. And then the Britons, through Geoffrey Monmouth, claimed their founder was a Trojan named Brutus. Troy became the original myth that basically all of Europe fought to claim. Now, the philosophy, the Iliad, basically gave us the concept of the tragic hero. The idea that greatness and destruction were kind of inseparable, and that the things that make someone extraordinary are also the same things that doom them. Achilles choosing glory over this long life and getting exactly that is the prime example, right? This framework, the hero who is undone by the very quality that makes them so heroic, runs through Shakespeare, through modern cinema, through, even analysis of modern athletes. Every story about a brilliant person brought down by their own nature. And the phrase Trojan Horse, you've obviously heard this, right? This has taken on a brand new life. In military strategy, it means a deceptive tactic, getting inside your enemy's defenses, but, appearing harmless. In cybersecurity, a Trojan Horse is literally malware disguised as an actual software that's, basically poisons your computer. So every time a security analyst talks about a Trojan, they're literally referencing this 3,000-year-old story from Homer. Plus Hollywood. They're obsessed with this. Brad Pitt plays Achilles in the 2004 film Troy. The story has been adapted into television and paintings and video games. Everywhere. Achilles and Hector are just the ultimate frenemies bromance thing. Heated rivalry 1.0. And even the 2018 BBC series Troy, Fall of a City, and a Madeline Miller novel, The Song of Achilles, and Circe brought the story of the Trojan War to everyone in the modern age. And perhaps most importantly, the Iliad gives us something that no other ancient text really does. It shows us the humanity on both sides of war, which is very unique for the time and really kind of unique now. Homer doesn't make the Greeks purely heroic or the Trojans purely villainous. Hector's arguably like the best character in the poem, right? Like he's like a good dude fighting for his family against impossible odds. Achilles is like the hero, but he's also like cruel and he's kind of like mopey and petty. The Iliad insists that war is both glorious and amazing, but also like horrifying, and that it brings out like the best in people, but the worst in people. And really that your enemy is a human being and that this feeling of pain and loss and grief is a universal feeling. That scene where Priam kneels before Achilles and they just hold each other and cry, sort of sharing this mutual loss, right? It may be one of the most important moments in all of Western literature. So, just to wrap up, the Trojan War sits at this crazy intersection, the place where like you have myth and history kind of like blurring into this sort of amorphous thing that no one can really fully explain. There was a real city that was really destroyed, and there was a real Bronze Age collapse of Greeks and, fighting between Bronze Age Greeks and Anatolian peoples. And, all this stuff did happen in theory, right? But the story that we tell about it, the Golden Apple, this beauty competition that turns into this big war with Helen, the most beautiful woman ever, all that kind of stuff, that obviously belongs to Homer and to the centuries of oral poets that kind of shaped the story before him. But I think Homer knew something in writing this that we're still learning today, and that our politicians and leaders from around the world are still like discovering every new generation, is that the real tragedy of war isn't about like who won or who lost. It's that it costs everyone. It's about enemies, a prideful hero, this, pitiful king, both kneeling in the dirt, weeping for the loss of their loved ones. And the fact that 3,000 years later, we're still telling the story, I don't know. I think there's something in that, right? That, you can imagine any conflict in the world where there's tragedy and death on both sides. Both of those groups that are dying have parents that love them. And oftentimes they're just people put in a situation where they kind of had no choice. And Homer knew it. And unfortunately, we're still figuring it out today. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an abridged history and mythology of the Battle of Troy. I mean, what a fascinating story. Like, you got to shout out the Greeks. I just want to say thank you to you and your ancestors for, I guess, two things. One, like, providing the West with an infrastructure for civilization and like democracy and philosophy and just everything you guys have contributed to my life, and also for producing this podcast.
Anytime, Mark.
Those two things go kind of hand in hand for me. But I mean, just what a crazy story. Did you read the Iliad when you were a kid? Was this like a part of like your Greek education?
I read the Odyssey in college.
All right.
Close enough.
We've strayed a long way from the times of Alexander the Great, but it's probably worth a read. I read the Odyssey High School, the Iliad College, and I thought the Iliad was better. The Odyssey is cool. Odyssey is like a lot of fun kind of stuff. You know what I mean? The hot sirens singing. Yeah,
that's the best part.
You dirty dog. Tie me up to the pole. Let me hear him. I mean, it's got cool stuff in there, right? Like, oh, he comes back and she's like, how do I know you're my husband? That whole thing.
It's a classic Joseph Campbell hero journey. So.
It's an all-time great story, of course. I mean, Homer's like legit the GOAT. But all that to say, the Iliad has something about it. Like, it's got like a heart to it that I don't know if the Odyssey has. And yeah, I mean, I remember reading it for the very first time. It was like 10 years ago. It just blew my mind. And it's just I don't know. It's a perhaps the most significant piece of literature ever. And it's crazy that it's still talked about so much to this day, and just the humanity that you see across the board. Now, something that I always thought was funny, and this is a little blue here, all right? So if there's any kids watching this, I would recommend you tune out here.
Earmuffs.
There's a type of latex contraceptive named Trojan.
Yep.
And people always pointed this out. They're like, the Trojan Horse is what people think about when they think of the Trojans.
Right.
Can you Google why they call themselves Trojan? Because like the irony is like, oh, you have this capsule that is brought in and, it seems like it's safe. And then a bunch of like little soldiers, escape out of the capsule. It seems like a bad kind of metaphor for contraceptive company. But I wonder if there's some other type of tie-in. What'd you find?
So it's this. It's to evoke strength, durability, and virility, referencing the impenetrable walls of the ancient city of Troy.
But they're not impenetrable.
Yeah.
Did they not finish it? Like, did they read like half the book and they were like, this city is pretty impenetrable. This is good.
Well, maybe they're trying to cover their asses by the fact that condoms are only 97% effective.
Oh, if they ever get a lawsuit and they're like, what happened? They're like, yeah, every now and again you get You
never heard of the Trojan Horse?
Yeah, you get a wooden horse that slips in. And their lawyers can be like, nah, read this shit. This will blow your mind. Man, that's wild. All right. Well, this has been a fabulous episode. I love learning ancient history. What a world. There's so much stuff to learn.
Especially when it's Greek.
All right. We're going to go to Persia next. Or we'll do Turkish history or something. I mean, you guys have been fighting the Hittites for a long time.
Well, last week we talked about Xerxes. That's another Greek W.
All right. Let's just, you know what? Let's wrap this up, guys. Great news. If you like this channel, we drop these episodes every week. But if you like the religious vibe and you like religious content, we have Religion Camp. If you like deep dives on current events, on crazy conspiracy stuff, on talking to way smarter people than me, actual experts on medieval history, on military stuff, geopolitics, that's Camp Gagnon. That's the main channel. You can see all those in the description. Google them. You'll find it. If you want to see me on the road, Mark Gagnon Live. And of course, if you want to hang out at the campsite, I mean, again, monthly live Zooms, extra content, talk to Christos. That is patreon.com/campgagnon.
Also, let's remind people to sign up on a web browser and not through the App Store. Save yourself some money.
Web browser, not the App Store. I like that. Well, shout out to Christos, putting cash in your pocket. Now, if you just rock with the history vibe, great news. We drop these episodes every single week, and I appreciate you guys being a part of the campsite and, yeah, just really, chilling with us while we build this thing into something awesome. I'm really grateful you guys are here, truly. And I will see you all in the future to talk about the past.